have got ourselves an absolutely loaded slate today for MLB DFS. When you look at the pitchers available on tonight's slate, you're just going to keep on smiling because there are so many young, electric, really fun starting pitchers on this slate. You can go kind of whichever way you want, and you've got a lot of options. That's really all you can ask for, and we're going to go through my three favorites, but honestly, I could have gone through 5 or 6 pitchers I like for tonight because it is that good of a slate. So let's slide on in and break all this down. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire, here to break down Tuesday's 10-game main slate with lock set for 7:05 this evening. And once again, it is a pretty fun slate. And the weather, not too bad from a rain perspective. We did have the one-game postponed already. I don't think the Yankees game was on the main slate to begin with. But outside of that, it is pretty cool once again in Milwaukee. It is 67 degrees there, and the roof will likely be open. So I'd upgrade pitchers a bit for the Brewers versus the White Sox. Not that they needed the upgrade. They were already awesome. We'll be talking extensively about that game later on. The winds are blowing in again for the Cubs and Royals in Wrigley Field. It's also just 68 degrees there. So bump up pitchers in Chicago. And the A's are back in Oakland for tonight, which means we got to downgrade them because the temperature is 59 degrees. It was fun while it lasted up in Seattle, but they're back in Oakland. So upgrade both pitchers out in Oakland. Outside of that, nothing real concerning from a weather perspective. There are a couple of games where maybe you could see some showers pop up. Atlanta perpetually during the summer has the threat of rain. Same thing for Colorado. So make sure you check out the 4 p.m. show today to get updates there. Speaking of which, if you have not heard yet, despite the fact that I've, berated you with it for the past couple of weeks now, we do have a live show 4 p.m. Eastern time every weekday over on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook pages, where I'm sitting down and answering questions for about a half an hour, getting you set for that night's MLB DFS slate. The advantage of that is I have additional news. We have some lineups to look at. I can pinpoint some specific values for you. So recommend checking that out if you have not, and ask as many questions as you have. We definitely can get those in there, and I can get to plenty of them during that 25-minute block. So subscribe to the FanDuel YouTube page, follow us on Twitch, like us on Facebook, whatever it may be. Make sure you head over there 4 p.m. Eastern time today to get set for tonight's slate. Outside of that, we got a lot of stuff going on the DFS feed for today. Tom Vecchio has already posted the Daily Deke and the Daily ISO, our NHL and NBA podcast, breaking down today's slates. We'll have a PGA podcast, the PGA Championship. That is coming up today. Technology permitting, Brandon will be calling in for at least a portion of that podcast to give you his thoughts on the PGA Championship. He is on vacation out west, but we will get at least, hopefully, some thoughts from Brandon at some point for the PGA Championship. So 4 podcasts around 4 different sports, all on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Make sure you find that, rate it, and review it, and let us know what you think wherever you listen to your podcasts. For years, numberFire's premium subscription service has provided our users with expert analysis, survivor pool tools, and most importantly, the fantasy football draft kit, all for up to $49.99 a month. Now, as a way of saying thank you to our community for years of support, numberFire is rolling out a new premium package for just $9.99 a month that will provide you with all the sports betting and daily fantasy tools you need year-round. And the best part is that expert analysis, those survivor tools, and yes, even the draft kit are now free. Head to numberFire.com, check out the new and improved site, and take advantage of the new premium package. Pitching preview for this Tuesday main slate. If you're looking at FanDuel right now, it lists Max Scherzer as the starting pitcher for the Nationals. He is not. It is Patrick Corbin. Once that is sorted out, it will be Patrick Corbin as the highest salary pitcher on the slate for tonight. He checks in at $10,800. Lucas Giolito is $9,400. Lance Lynn, always fun, facing the A's, $9,300. Brandon Woodruff is $92,000, facing Giolito. And we have Max Fried, Dinelson Lamet, and Kyle Hendricks as the others at $8,000 or higher. So again, a lot of really fun names on that list and a lot of dudes who can get strikeouts. Now, despite all those options, my 2 highest ranked pitchers of the slate are facing each other. And that's a bummer because it means that at least one of them will not get a win tonight. But with these strikeout numbers lining up the way they do and the matchups lining up the way they do, it is hard for me to not go this route. That game is that one in Milwaukee between the White Sox and the Brewers with Giolito facing Woodruff. And they will be the top two pitchers at the top of my list. So let's go through why here. And I've recommended stacking the White Sox several times this year, including yesterday. Kind of a mixed bag for them in that game. Did score 6 runs, but it took some time. It's been a mixed bag, but I've been more than okay stacking them so far in 2020. And that's because they're a team that can punish a pitcher when they make contact. But they can also not make contact. They can strike out plenty. So they're kind of like this beautiful team for DFS, where they're almost always in play for one reason or another. Stacking or using a pitcher against them, they can fit in both ways. And this time, it is due to the pitcher they are facing, and that is Brandon Woodruff, who is $9,200. And I think that Woodruff is just an underappreciated ace in MLB DFS. Woodruff had 10 strikeouts his last time out, and I don't think we can be surprised by that anymore. He's been throwing his sinker more often for a healthy amount now for his past 13 starts. And 13 starts is more than a large enough sample for that strikeout rate to stabilize. And Woodruff's strikeout rate in those 13 starts is 30%. It's a large sample. That's a large strikeout rate. He has had just disgusting stuff, a 3.20 skill interactive ERA with a 6% walk rate on top of getting ground balls and limiting hard contact. Woodruff checks every box. He is a well-rounded pitcher. The White Sox active roster does have a 106 WRC plus against righties since the start of the last year. Again, you can find that over at fangraphs.com. So they're a solid above average offense, but they also have a 26% strikeout rate and a 7% walk rate. That is perfect for Woodruff, a guy who can get those strikeouts and keep them on the ground. He is at home, which is a plus as well. Strikeout rates for pitchers are still higher at home this year than on the road. I checked into that last week. It's still been the case despite the fact there are no fans. So home is still a plus for pitchers. So it's hard not to love Woodruff regardless of his salary. And he's $9,200. So Brandon Woodruff, the number one pitcher for me tonight, despite facing an offense that I will stack pretty often and will continue to do so for the rest of the year. Now, the upside on Giolito on the other side of this game may not be, or it may actually be a bit higher than Brandon Woodruff's. It's the floor that makes me favor Woodruff over Giolito, and I don't think the ceilings are big enough for me to put Giolito higher, despite the fact I think his ceiling is a tiny bit higher. The reason that the ceiling is so high on Giolito is that he gets a ton of strikeouts. He had a 32% strikeout rate for the full season last year, but he had gotten even better as the season went along, and most of that was because of his changeup. He first upped his changeup usage back in May, then went even higher with it in July. He threw it 47% of the time in his most recent start this year and looked better than he did in his opener. So I'd expect that high changeup usage to continue. And if we look at the past 13 starts for Giolito with more changeups, he has a 35% strikeout rate with a 3.17 skill interactive ERA. That Sierra is best on the slate, and it is a loaded slate of pitcher, and the strikeout rate is also highest for Giolito. He did struggle in his first starts, rebounded a bit in his second, but it's also worth looking at the teams he faced. He faced Minnesota and Cleveland. Cleveland has been bad this year offensively, but they don't strike out, nor do the Twins, and the Twins are very good. Now, the Brewers aren't a huge strikeout team, but their active roster is 17th in strikeout rate against righties since the start of last year, so a better strikeout matchup for Giolito. And the strikeout rate is why I think the ceiling for Giolito is a bit higher than for Woodruff's. The reason that I put Woodruff higher is that I think that Giolito hasn't looked as good as Woodruff in his first two starts this year. That does matter at least a bit. He also hasn't pitched as deep into games. He's gone 80 and 85 pitches in those first two games. So that's why Woodruff is number one on my list. But the strikeouts are enough for me to put Giolito second at $9,400, even though I have some concerns around the other stuff within his profile. Despite those concerns, he is still number two for me. So it's Woodruff 1, Giolito 2 at the top end of the list. As far as a value pitcher goes, I'm not going to go super low. We will talk about a guy in the 7,000 range in things to watch, but I want to focus on a guy who is $8,500, who has a lot of upside and potentially unrealized upside. And that guy is Max Fried. He's been a pitcher I've been watching and been interested in for a really long time now. But Fried just keeps on getting better, and the arrow on him is continuing to shoot up. Now, the pitch count is up for Max Fried. It was not in his last start, so I couldn't go there then, even though I was super interested in him. And now I think we can, as he is facing the Blue Jays. Fried, just 67 pitches in his first start. He was up to 85 in his second. So I think we could see him around 95 tonight, and they will be 95 good pitches based on what Fried has done over a pretty large sample now. We saw Fried in his first 2 starts this year, going back to his slider once again. He's thrown it 23% of the time so far this year. That number was 16% last year, so a pretty good increase on that slider, and we want him throwing that pitch. He had a 239 expected WOBA against that pitch last year, according to Baseball Savant. The fastball was not as good, but he's been cutting down on the usage on that for a bit now, over his past 9 starts specifically. So fewer fastballs for Max Fried is a good thing, and over his past 9 starts with those fewer fastballs, he has a 3.19 skill interactive ERA with a 29% strikeout rate. Now, you can look at Fried's profile in the time and say, hey, he's allowing too much hard contact, and that is definitely a concern, but a lot of that hard contact is at least on the ground. He's facing the Blue Jays here, and the Blue Jays have some fun names. They have some monster pop, but they also have a 25% strikeout rate against lefties since the start of last year. So I think that, again, if I'm going to use a term to describe Fried, I would say it's that he has sneaky upside for tonight. I don't think people will be super into him, but I am, given the potential that he has based on this 9-start sample, based on the strikeout ability, based on the matchup. Everything lines up for Max Fried to be a really solid option for this slate. So I want to make sure I am overweight on Max Fried. $8,500 is a cheap salary for someone with his upside. I would rank him below Woodruff and Giolito, and I think that his salary is close enough where I can, while favoring them, just put them higher on my list straight up. But I think even if I'm at 25% Max Fried tonight, I'll easily be overweight. So I think that Woodruff 1, Giolito 2, Fried 3 on my list for tonight. And again, we'll go through one more of a value arm in things to watch. But first, let's go through the stacks for tonight. And Coors Field is in play tonight. It's not as much of an auto stack as it was last night, but I still think we can go with the Rockies here. They're facing, I assume, Kevin Gausman. Again, it's not officially announced yet because why would Gabe Kapler make things easy for us? But it'll probably be Gausman. And Gausman has had some bad luck. He's not as bad as his results would state, both last year and this year. But he's also not someone we need to avoid when he's at Coors Field. I can say that pretty definitively. As a starter since the start of last year, Gausman has a 4.26 xFIP. He has a 25% strikeout rate, and he allows a 39% hard hit rate. When you combine those numbers with the bad results he has had, it's pretty clear we can dive into Gausman, especially when he's at Coors Field. So I'm in on the Rockies here. It is worth noting that Gausman has kind of weird reverse platoon splits. If we look at him last year against righties, he had a 22% strikeout rate. That's compared to a 29% strikeout rate against lefties. He also got fewer ground balls against righties. So I'm not saying I expect the Rockies to recognize this because they make some very questionable decisions higher up, so we don't want to, overestimate the decision-making abilities of the Rockies. But it does mean we should bump up the super obvious guys like Trevor Story and Nolan Arenado. I would also think this helps Matt Kemp if he starts again tonight. Chris Owings would benefit too. Owings had a home run last night. Those guys have started against righties on Sunday and Monday. Should they start? That's a great question. I don't know, but they might play once again today, so I think that Kemp and Owings on the lower end, Story and Arenado on the top end, among the studs within this Rockies lineup, especially Arenado, $3,800, way too cheap for someone as good as him, facing a guy with reverse platoon splits at Coors Field. Give me all that, all the Nolan Arenado for tonight's slate. Now, as mentioned, not super into the Giants tonight. They're facing Edman Marquez. He's really good, so I think I am okay looking elsewhere for my second stack. And when we do that, I think that we can take advantage of the Astros tonight. And I haven't gotten to do that very often this year because the Astros generally too expensive. And they've been facing some pretty good pitchers. They've been in bad parks. But we have some flexibility with our hitters for tonight. And I'm not sure the Astros will be all that popular. So I'm stacking them against Madison Bumgarner. And there's a couple of reasons that I want to do this. And the first one is that Bumgarner's first 2 starts have gone pretty poorly. He's looked really stagnant. It's been concerning. He has an 8.0% swinging strike rate in those first 2 starts. And in a vacuum, that would not necessarily be concerning. But Those two starts were against the Rangers and the Padres. Those two teams are dead last and 23rd, respectively, in strikeout rate against lefties. You would expect Madison Bumgarner to get a ton of whiffs against those two specific teams. The Astros are first in that department. Their strikeout rate is like half of what the Rangers is. It's actually almost half. It's like 5 percentage points off, which is just absurd. And they are an outlier in that respect. And that's when we dig in more with what's gone wrong with Mad Bum, and we start to see that there are some pretty troubling signs here. The first one is that his velocity is horrible. It's terrible. Usually I don't like to put a lot of stock in velocity in a two-start sample. When it's this bad, I will. His four-seam fastball velocity is down 3.5 miles per hour from last year. His cutter is down 3.9. Curveball is down 2.5. And we could chalk that up to pitching in cooler conditions because he was indoors in Texas and also in San Diego. But then you remember that he spent most of last year in San Francisco, which is even colder than those two areas. And the velocity is down in cold weather, so you'd expect it to be down, but it was even lower last year, the temperature was. So I'm worried about Madison Bumgarner. He might not be right at the moment. And you combine that with a tough spot here, having to face this Astros team when you may not have your best stuff. And I think that's going to lead to some really troubling things for Madison Bumgarner. I'm hoping people don't pick up on this because if we can get the Astros at lower popularity, awesome, totally in on that. And I think that it is going to be a situation where they could be a hugely profitable stack, even at not a lot of popularity. So I'm hoping people don't realize the concern in Madison Bumgarner's first two starts. Hopefully he turns it around because I like Madison Bumgarner. I'd like him to succeed. But if he doesn't, I think the Astros are a great stack for tonight. It also helps that they're not super high salaried right now. Alex Bregman, the only guy here with a salary above $3,600. Yuli Gurriel is $2,800. Should bat in the middle part of the order with the platoon advantage. So I think that when you see the pitchers for tonight being in the low 9,000s and the mid 8,000s, it's pretty easy to get the Astros, especially if you plug Gurriel in there. You've got a lot of flexibility. So I think the Astros, not a team I've stacked a whole lot so far this year. That will change tonight against Madison Bumgarner. For our third stack, the Angels are likely to get Mike Trout back from paternity leave for tonight. So congrats to Mike Trout. We got the new father narrative working in Mike Trout's favor. Yasmani Grandal drove in Luis Robert last night. So we had the double narrative work with the White Sox. Maybe we'll get to work with the Angels here as well. And Trout being back upgrades this entire lineup. And it's just in time for a matchup against Justin Dunn. And Dunn was a really good pitcher in Double-A last year. He had a 29% strikeout rate with a 7% walk rate. But for whatever reason, Dunn hasn't been able to get the control in line in the majors. He has a 16% strikeout rate overall in the majors with a 27% walk rate. That's really high. And Dunn's been changing things up. He's been throwing a slider more often in his most recent three starts. It's a very small sample because it's three starts, but he hasn't gone more than 65 pitches in any of those. That does include his one start this year, but the walk rate's still 14% in that time with a 21% strikeout rate. And the team that he faced, his first start this year, was the Angels. And they're familiar with what he's doing now. Dunn in that game got bounced after 3 innings. The Angels scored 7 runs in that game. And what we want is access to middle relief pitching. That's why I don't actively seek out guys with high walk rates, but I am accepting of a high walk rate because it probably means I'll get more access to middle relief pitching, and that's a good thing from a DFS perspective. The Angels got a lot of it the last time they faced Dunn, should get plenty here too, so I think the Angels are a worthy stack yet again, and getting Trout back helps everyone as well. They got it sounds like they're calling up Joe Adell. Adell not in the player pool on FanDuel. That may impact who winds up playing for today, but hopefully Justin Upton and Brian Goodwin play because they're both decently cheap. Upton, $2,700, just a 27% strikeout rate against righties since the start of last year to go with a 37% hard hit rate and a 47% fly ball rate. Goodwin, 39% hard hit rate against righties since the start of last year, 46% fly ball rate. So with Trout being back and Adell being called up, it's very possible that one or both those guys sit. I'd assume Goodwin winds up sitting, but if we get one of them in there, I think they're really solid value options. Upton 27, Goodwin 29. Hopefully those guys play, and can help you get up to Trout in his return. Anthony Rendon, $3,900 if you want a little bit of a cheaper stud in there as well. They haven't said about what Shohei Ohtani's outlook will be as far as getting him in there as a pitcher or as a hitter now that he's banged up, but I would bet he's probably not going to play for tonight. Things to watch on this slate. If you want another super cheap pitcher recommendation, Christian Javier is at least in play at $7,200. I was worried about his pitch count in his first game, but hey, I forgot that this is Dusty Baker. So Javier went a full 82 pitches. Good for you, Dusty. Javier fully stretched out. He can get whiffs too. He had 8 strikeouts over 5 2/3 innings against the Dodgers in that start. 39% strikeout rate in AA last year for Javier. So that's all really good. The reason that I did not have him in my top 3 was walks. His walk rate was 13% in AA. Doesn't get ground balls. So it's a situation where Javier could get rocked. But you can easily justify him at $7,200 if you're multi-entering for tournaments. I think that like if I had 10 lineups, I probably wouldn't get to Javier. But once you get beyond that, that's a situation where I would dabble at least in him and load up on all the Rockies and Astros that I wanted. The Marlins are back today. They're facing John Means. I think they are. I don't know. Things always change throughout the show. So I think the Marlins are back. They're facing John Means. The game is in Baltimore. That's good for hitting. So I would say to check out some Marlins, but A, the team strength is going to be terrible. The timing on the bats may be off because they've been off for so long. And C, I have no idea who is healthy for this Marlins team. They have not said who is going on the injury list with sickness. So if you find yourself needing another stick, you can check out Jesus Aguilar, Brian Anderson, maybe Jonathan Villar, but I just don't know what that team will look like as of now. So maybe look at the Marlins to see if you can get a one-off in there. But I cannot tell you who will play for them today because we have no information with regards to who is healthy and who is not for that team. Finally, if you need more bats, I think you could consider the Braves against Matt Shoemaker. Shoemaker pitched really well in his Blue Jays debut, which was basically a month ago because the Blue Jays have been off for a bit too. But in that game, Shoemaker went 6 innings and allowed just 1 run. But he didn't get a lot of whiffs, 8.6% swinging strike rate, and that was against a Rays team that does strike out a ton. So even when Shoemaker was looking good, didn't get a lot of whiffs, even back in the day when Shoemaker was someone I used in DFS, he would let up a ton of hard contact. So again, he did look good in that first start. The velocity was back out to its 2018 levels. He was throwing a splitter a lot, and that's good. But on a slate with so much good pitching, I think you can justify an Atlanta stack here. So Atlanta, definitely a place I would turn to if you need some help getting up to guys like Arenado, Story, etc., etc. That is all the time that we have for today. But again, we are back at 4 p.m. Eastern right here on the FanDuel YouTube page to break down lineups as they come out and answer all the questions you may have. So if you have questions about the slate, about my process, about anything else, just preferably not season long because I know nothing about season long. I mean, I play it, but I'm not good at it. Make sure you check out the FanDuel YouTube page, 4 p.m. Eastern time today, also on Twitch and Facebook. Get those questions in, and we'll get to as many as we can to get you set for tonight's slate. If you have questions before them, I am on Twitter at Jimsannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. A lot of good stuff going on right now on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Again, NHL, NBA, MLB podcasts every day. PGA podcast going up today, and the NASCAR podcast going up on Thursday. So make sure to subscribe there. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, for your hard work as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck with your MLB DFS lineup for tonight. Enjoy the tremendous pitching we should see. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. This has been the solo shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.